Hi guys, welcome back to Abroad and Growing. If you're new here, my name is Cindy, and together with my other two amazing friends, Nashi and Shiro, who are not here today, by the way, it's just me hosting today's episode. We created this platform to share our real stories about navigating or living life abroad. We are sharing the beautiful part, the messy part, and the parts that no one really prepares you for. So we believe, or me and my other two amazing friends believe, that growth happens through the things we go through, and through sharing our experiences as Africans living abroad. We hope someone out there will feel seen, heard, and understood. So even if it's not much like feels being seen and heard and understood, then maybe a little, at least our goal is more like to make someone to feel like they belong. So before I start this episode, just a short disclaimer. Today's episode is not about a vent session or a post for shaming anyone. Germany has been my home for a while now, and I am still a working progress. So when I'm sharing my figuring out moments, I'm sharing them because they are real and they are mine, and they are part of an honest evolution of an African living abroad. So today's episode's title is Becoming Ourselves. So the things we are still figuring out. Yeah. So honestly, this episode feels very personal, and because moving abroad just doesn't change your location, it changes slowly, painfully, sometimes beautifully. And today I just wanted to have an honest conversation about things nobody really talks about enough, things like identity, loneliness, stereotypes, friendship, money pressure, dating, etc., you name it. And the whole quiet process of becoming someone new while trying not to lose yourself in the process. So grab your coffee, grab your tea, grab your snacks, and wherever you are listening me from or watching me from, welcome home. Welcome. So the first point I'm just going to talk about is the identity shift, or the identity shifts. Bear with me, I might get mixed up in between when it comes to grammar, or because mind you, I am not a bilingual, multi how do you say it? Correct me in the comment section. How do you call someone who speaks many languages? And what's the name of that person? So I am just going to speak however I feel comfortable in. If you feel to correct me, you can also tell me how to pronounce it or say it in English, or better, because I'm expressing myself in English even though I speak other languages. So where was I? So I wanted to pinpoint the first point, which is identity shifts. Yeah, who we thought we were versus who we are becoming. So moving from the vibrant communal warmth of Kenya to the structured individualistic landscape of Germany is less of a change of scenery and more of a complete dismantling of oneself. So when you grow up in Kenya, like I did, or my other two friends did, your identity is often a beautiful tangled web of we. You are your father's daughter, your tribe's representative, and a product of culture where your worth is tied to how well you fulfill expectations. Whereas in Germany, that web is cut, and suddenly you aren't a Chieng, Wajiku, Shiro, Nashi, daughter or sister, the neighbor of. You are just a person, and often a foreigner. Here's how the transition forces a radical redefinition of one's soul. So from a community property to a radical autonomy, in Kenya, decisions are rarely made in a vacuum. What will the aunties say? What will the neighbors say? What will people say? In Germany, however, in a culture of hyper-independence, there's always a shift. The first time your weekends aren't dictated by weddings or church functions. You have hours of silence. You have to ask yourself, what do I actually like to do when no one is watching or judging? You find your hobbies back home were actually just social obligations. And then you have to redefine yourself. So redefining yourself means, or at least to us abroad and growing, is building a personality from scratch based on personal preferences rather than a community or a communal duty. So you find yourself, you carry like the weight of representative. So as a young African woman in Europe, you quickly realize you are often the only person who looks like you in the room wherever you go. Yeah. So you have that burden. The burden back home, you are just a person. In Germany, you are often seen as a spokesperson for the entire continent. Yeah. At home, you belong to a certain community, then the identity shift happen. You are now an individual, mostly known as the foreigner. This forces some sort of redefinition. You have to decide if you want to carry that weight, like the weight of either thinking of who you are as in that community, or who you are becoming, who you have to, when you're realizing now you are an individual, or most often known as a foreigner. You have to decide you want to carry the weight, or then you have to redefine yourself, meaning learning when to be the Kenyan girl and when to just be a woman who happens to be frustrated when you miss a Deutsche Bahn, or you forget where you are going because you cannot navigate the streets of Germany. Those moments are really defining. And as a young Kenyan or a young girl, yeah, it's all about reclaiming your right to be an individual, not a symbol, because that's what you are seen. You are seen as a symbol, and back home you belong to a community, and now suddenly you are representing the entire continent. So how do you navigate the experience or the expectation? There is this specific pressure from back home, the burden of success. People assume that because you are in Europe, you have made it. That everyone you meet here always says that, like people back home think that, but the reality, you might be struggling, but that's the reality of everyone. I'm repeating myself, but anywho, that's my point. The reality is that we are all struggling. You're struggling with the language, you're struggling with the cold weather, or the complex bureaucracy of the Ausländerbehörde. I don't know, what is Ausländerbehörde in English? Ausländerbehörde. Anybody who is listening, you can tell me in the comment section, how do you call Ausländerbehörde in English? But I think if I were to translate it, Ausländerbehörde is mostly like those offices that are responsible for foreigners. Yeah, for foreigners. Yeah, tell me the right word. Yeah, I'm struggling here. The right word of Ausländerbehörde in English. The point of you redefining yourself is that you have to learn to say no to financial or social exploitation from home to protect your own mental health. Yeah, because there's that burden you carry. You've made it, and now you have to provide if you've made it. So you have to learn to say no. You redefine success not as how much money you send back home, but how much peace you have managed to carve out of yourself in a place that feels alien. This is also language and loss of wit. In Swahili or in your mother tongue, mine is Luo. My other two friends are Masai and Kikuyu. So in those languages, or the Kenyan languages, you might be funny when you are explaining a joke to your friends. You might be sharp and very commanding if your personality is just that outgoing. But in Germany, especially at first, since you're learning it for the first time, you might feel diminished or childlike because you can't express complex emotions. Yes, I'm looking outside there because I'm sitting at the roof and I can see aeroplanes passing by, getting distracted a little bit. Yeah, so yes, you can't express complex emotions because you're learning this language and it's your first time. So this forces you to find a core identity that isn't dependent on words. Yeah, since you cannot speak German clearly, and the only way you can express yourself is your mother tongue or is Swahili, and that you learn who you are through your actions, your resilience, your work ethic. You realize that your value isn't just in your performance or your voice, but in your presence. In summary, about the transformation, in summary, moving to Germany didn't just change my address from Kenya to Germany, wherever I'm living currently. It stripped away the masks I didn't even know I was wearing. I arrived here in Germany as the daughter of my parents, but I became the mother of my own future. Ultimately, you stop being a reflection of what your culture wants you to be and start becoming the architect of who you want to be or who you actually are. It is lonely, yes. It is challenging, yes. It is cold, but it is the most honest version of yourself you'll ever meet. Another point I wanted to talk about is how we are navigating stereotypes and being seen through a new lens. Yeah, so I think this is where the honeymoon, the honeymoon phase of moving abroad usually ends, and the heavy lifting of psychological survival begins. Man, it's hard. In Kenya, you're simply a person. In Germany, you often become a category, basically. Like I mentioned earlier, you are viewed as a foreigner, so this is like you belong to a certain group or category. So realizing that you are being viewed through a lens of othersness or someone else, it's like walking into a room and realizing that everyone else is looking at a silhouette of you, not actually a woman you are or an individual you are, but a silhouette of you. The first time it hits you is usually a quiet moment. It's when you realize people are surprised by your perfect English, that you have a degree coming from Kenya or in a degree from any African country, or even your German has improved in the meantime, like you speak perfect German. Some even ask you, hey, you speak good German or something like that. They're also surprised at your tech savviness. You aren't just being viewed on your character, you are just being measured against a documentary someone watched the other night or 5 years ago. Yeah, you realize that to many, you are an African girl, an African woman, yeah, a monolith of poverty, struggle, or exotic mystery, yeah, rather than an individual with a specific Kenyan upbringing. Microaggressions are rarely loud. They are subtle and repetitive, and trust me, so exhausting. The curiosity is always like, can I touch your hair? Oh, that. Sometimes you'll be like walking, you're like grocery shopping at a supermarket, and somebody, just a stranger, literally just walks to you and says like, can I touch your hair? Your hair is nice. Yeah. Or your skin is smooth, like what do you put on? Like, can I touch it? Yeah. So this impacts you. So these aren't just compliments. I mean, maybe at first you'll think it's a compliment, but over the time you realize, since they're repetitive, they are not just compliments. They are reminders that you are being viewed like an exhibit in a museum. When someone asks how long it takes to wash your hair, they are often unconsciously framing your existence as extra work or abnormal. It turns your body into a conversation piece for entertainment. There's this kind of myth that also always is like the man behind the curtain. So there's this perverse quiet sting in the assumption that a successful African woman, they must they must they must have been saved, or there must be a sponsor behind it, the reason as to why they are successful. Yeah, or if they have a high ranking position in Munich, or whichever whichever city they are living in, whether it's somewhere else abroad. In my case, it's Germany. There must be some kind of a guy behind it. There's this also the fetishization, the okay, the Lua in me is creeping in. So there's this on the flip side. There is this, you deal with the savior complex, and or you deal with men who view you as a troop of traditional subservience because you are just an African. Some will even say like, leave her. What does she know? She's just an African. Yeah, it's a double-edged sword. Either you are a gold digger or you are a prize to be collected. Both of these, a prize to be collected or a gold digger, they erase your actual intellect and hard work. How do you protect your peace in such a situation? Like, you cannot always be the spokesperson. This is the spokesperson trap. Like, you are a spokesperson of all the African women. No. One of the hardest things to learn is that you are not a walking Wikipedia page. Yeah, because there's this like educator fatigue, something that you struggle with, because you always have to explain yourself all the time. Initially, you might feel the need to patiently explain why you don't speak African, because honestly, there is no language that is called African. Africa consists of so many countries, and all of these countries, there's so many different tribes and they speak different languages. Therefore, there is no one particular language that the entire people in Africa speak that is called African. Let's realize it. So it's always very exhausting explaining that there is no language that is called African. So, or also something else like, or in Kenya has a skyscrapers and a tech hub. Come on. Yeah. So the pivot to peace is like, you eventually realize that educating every person who makes a curious comment is a full-time job that doesn't pay. Strategies for the modern Kenyan woman in Germany is redefining your lessons to survive this. You have to develop a selective filter. You learn to distinguish between a genuine curiosity, like maybe just a friend who wants to learn about your culture or where you're coming from, and an entitlement, yeah, a stranger who wants to just pet you because they feel like, because you are the African, yeah. Redefining yourself in this context means accepting that you cannot control the lens through which others see you, but you can control how much your energy you give to their blurred vision. You start to find power in being unapologetically yourself. You wear the braids whenever you want them without anybody asking you, like, oh, nice braid, how do you wash it, or something like that. Talk however you want with your Kenyan accent, or with any African accent, whatever part of Africa you're coming from. Be proud of your accent. Be ambitious. Go for it all, without feeling the need to apologize for the fact that you are always like, you don't fit in, or you always don't fit into their narrow box of the African woman. You aren't there to represent Kenya or the entire Africa. You are there to live your life. And sometimes the most radical thing you can do is just exist peacefully without explaining yourself to anyone, right? Yes. Live your life